Hey, I have, early on in my life, I had a lot of cognitions or realizations, epiphanies, about the subject of responsibility. And this is kind of one of those, well, to use a saying that my ex-husband, I don't know if he coined the phrase or not, but it's sort of been like a bognition. So you know how like a cognition is when you cognite, you realize, you have an epiphany, you have, it's that sort of thing. So excuse the hair. So early on in life, in fact, sadly, one of the people I was recently closely connected with turned me on to some information about this when I was very young, about 16. And I actually fully invested myself into the information, and it helped me realize a lot of stuff in life. So I've sort of, I'm not perfect, right? I'm totally not perfect, but I've often prided myself on the fact that I can take ownership for mistakes I've made. I can apologize. I can say, yeah, I did that and I fucked up and I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. I'll work on it. I will try to do better next time, right? So I've realized kind of the next stage in my quote unquote healing journey, or my journey to higher spiritual awareness. This is going to sound really crazy, but like the problem in my life, and it's going to sound like I'm blaming other people, but the problem in my life has actually, oh boy, been when I run into situations with other people who haven't had this cognition on the subject of responsibility, and they can't own anything in their situations with other people. They don't have that sense of responsibility. Like they haven't had wins on the sense of responsibility. So like every time they may have tried to be responsible, they just end up feeling shame and blame and so on. But that's not actual responsibility. Blame and shame and regret and all of that, that's not responsibility. I'm not going to go into that right now, or my realizations on the subject, but I just realized every challenging situation in my life has resulted from an attachment to a person who, and I don't want this to sound like I'm belittling people, but they haven't had that realization on responsibility. Like they haven't. So in dealing with a person like this, and there's varying degrees, like there's varying degrees of like acute, whatever. And then, there's extreme examples where they just literally can't take ownership for any involvement with you at all. It's all your fault, and it's anything you try to say to them to try to ask them to have accountability or responsibility for their involvement is just seen as an attack or a criticism. And I know this is in many circles, in many different fields of thought and different walks of life and all of that, like lots of people have experienced this. And the certain path that I was on, I'm not speaking religiously, I'm just saying like the path that I went along on my realizations on this subject, you can get there from many different paths, just as there are many paths to the bridge to total freedom, right? There are many different paths that anyone in the world can come to realize on this, right? Anyway, I just thought I would say that when I ask somebody to take responsibility for their side in their interaction with me and how they've treated me, it's not a rejection of my own responsibility in my own side in how I've interacted with them, or my response, or how I've, may have reacted to something they said or did or whatever, right? So yeah, I own all my stuff, but I also know that people who are highly responsible, meaning like people who do take ownership, the people who can't take ownership will very often and I'm just learning this. Like, how am I just learning this? This is so basic and elementary. But the people who can't take ownership for stuff will very often use against you what you've taken responsibility for, or what you have admitted guilt for, or admitted that you did something wrong or something like that. So, that's all fine and good. But if somebody else is involved with you and they can't take ownership for their side, very often they'll try to use against you your sense of responsibility. And they'll call anything that you say to ask them to take responsibility for their side in things an attack, a criticism, whatever it is, right? Like something along those lines. And they will not only will they not take ownership, but they'll say that you're just trying to criticize them by saying, hey, you said XYZ and that actually turned out to be a lie, or like you did XYZ and that kind of hurt me. So can you just like own that you did that? They'll take that as being like, oh, you're just trying to attack me. Nope. Just would like you to take responsibility for your side in things. That's it. And it's amazing, like I wish I could say that I think this is like the other side of something I'm supposed to realize, but like I don't know. It just, it does get kind of tiring after a little while when you're the only person in a two-sided, relationship or a friendship with someone, and you're always the person who takes responsibility for what you did, but that other person never does. It gets a bit tiring after a while. So, anyway, I'm still learning on this subject. I'm trying to learn how to use it appropriately so that you're not actually like seen as like only trying to blame someone else for a situation and not take responsibility, but you're trying to get them to just own their side and like, hey, can we both agree what we did and how it affected the other person, kind of a thing. Anyway, those are my thoughts.